She never meant to fall in love with her boss. She never meant to leave the voicemail. And she never imagined she would stay. By the time Mara Lewis locked her apartment door, the day had already defeated her. Her shoulders ached from carrying too much, work deadlines, school runs, silent worries she never said out loud. The hallway light flickered as it always did, and for a moment she stood there, forehead resting against the wood, breathing. 40 wasn't old. She knew that intellectually. But it felt heavy some days, like life had chosen its shape without consulting her. Her daughter was asleep at her ex's place. The apartment was too quiet. She poured herself a glass of wine. Then another. She didn't rush it. She just let herself exist. And somehow, inevitably, her thoughts drifted to Evelyn Hart. CEO. Controlled. Brilliant. The woman who never raised her voice, yet commanded every room. The woman who remembered Mara's coffee order. Who asked about her daughter by name. Who noticed when Mara stopped speaking in meetings and gently asked for her opinion anyway. Mara sank onto the couch, phone warm in her hand. She told herself not to. She never listened. The city outside blurred into reflections and rain. Mara scrolled through her contacts. Her thumb hesitated. She laughed quietly, sadly. "This is ridiculous," she whispered. But the loneliness pressed close. The kind that feels like a hand on your chest. She pressed record before she could stop herself. "Hi. Evelyn." Her voice surprised her. Soft. Honest. Unguarded. As the words spilled out, something in her cracked open. Years of restraint. Of not wanting too much. Of knowing her place. The confession came out imperfect and trembling and real. When the voicemail ended, reality rushed back in. "Oh God," Mara whispered. She stared at the phone as if it had betrayed her. She curled onto the couch, arms wrapped around herself, and cried, not dramatically, but quietly, like someone who had learned not to make a mess of her feelings. Sleep came eventually. The morning light was cruel. Mara woke with a dry mouth and a pounding head. For a blissful few seconds, she forgot. Then memory hit. The voicemail. Her stomach dropped. She didn't check her phone. She couldn't bear to see proof. She moved through the morning like a ghost, packing lunches, braiding hair, smiling for her daughter. "Are you okay, Mum?" her daughter asked. "Just tired," Mara said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. After the school drop-off, Mara sat in her car and cried until the steering wheel blurred. At work, she avoided Evelyn's floor entirely. Until the calendar invite arrived. 11 a.m., private meeting. No subject line. No explanation. Evelyn Hart listened to the voicemail twice before she allowed herself to breathe. The first time, she stood frozen in her penthouse kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, coffee growing cold in her hand. The second time, she sat down. Mara's voice stayed with her, warm, unsure, brave in a way Evelyn rarely allowed herself to be. No one spoke to her like that. People wanted things from her. Approval. Power. Security. Mara hadn't asked for anything. She had only offered truth. Evelyn closed her eyes and let herself feel the ache she usually buried beneath schedules and strategy. She scheduled the meeting. She didn't know what would happen. She only knew she couldn't pretend it hadn't mattered. Mara entered Evelyn's office feeling like she might shatter. Evelyn stood when she saw her. "I listened to your voicemail." Mara's breath caught. Shame flooded her. "I'm sorry," she rushed. "It was inappropriate. I understand if." "Please don't apologize yet," Evelyn said gently. Her voice wasn't distant. It wasn't corporate. It was human. As Evelyn spoke, Mara realized something terrifying. Evelyn wasn't angry. She was moved. When Evelyn admitted her loneliness, Mara's heart broke open again, this time with tenderness instead of fear. They didn't touch. But something passed between them, fragile and electric. They agreed to go slowly. To be careful. To be honest. When Mara left the office, her legs trembled, but she was smiling. The weeks that followed were quiet, deliberate. They didn't sit next to each other in meetings. They didn't exchange glances. Instead, they walked out of the building together some evenings. Talked about books. About mistakes. About motherhood and ambition. Evelyn confessed she had never built a life outside work. Mara confessed she had stopped believing someone extraordinary could choose her. Neither rushed the other. And that made it feel real. The first time Evelyn saw Mara with her daughter, something shifted. They ran into each other accidentally at a cafe on a Saturday morning. Mara was laughing, hair loose, eyes softer than Evelyn had ever seen them. Evelyn watched from a distance, heart tight. This wasn't just attraction. This was a life. Later, when they walked together, Evelyn said quietly, "I don't want to be another complication for you." Mara met her gaze. "You're not." But fear lived between them. They didn't kiss. Not yet. The almost kiss happened on a rainy evening. They stood under the awning outside Mara's building, the city hushed around them. Evelyn lifted a hand, hesitated, then let it fall. "I don't want to take something we can't protect," she said. Mara nodded, heart aching. "Thank you for wanting to protect it," she replied. They hugged instead, longer than necessary. It was harder than a kiss. The choice came months later. Evelyn stepped back professionally, restructuring leadership to remove conflict. It wasn't easy. It wasn't clean. But it was intentional. When she told Mara, her voice shook. "I didn't do this for you," she said. "I did it because I want a life that includes us." Mara cried then, openly. This time, when they kissed, it was slow. Certain. Earned. Sometimes, late at night, Evelyn still listens to the voicemail. Not because it was perfect. But because it was brave. Because it was the moment someone loved her without guarantees. And Mara, who almost deleted herself out of fear, learned that honesty, even drunken and trembling, can change everything. Love didn't arrive all at once. It arrived in small, ordinary moments that felt sacred because they were shared. Evelyn learned the rhythm of Mara's mornings, how she moved quietly before dawn, how she paused in the doorway of her daughter's room just to watch her sleep. Mara learned that Evelyn liked silence before coffee and playlists only after noon. They didn't rush cohabitation. Evelyn had a penthouse that felt like a hotel. Mara had an apartment that felt like a life. So Evelyn came to Mara. She took off her shoes at the door. She learned where the mugs were. She learned how to sit on the floor and help with homework, how to listen when Mara talked about school meetings and small humiliations no boardroom could compare to. One night, as they washed dishes side by side, Evelyn said quietly, "I've negotiated billion-pound deals that scared me less than this." Mara smiled without looking up. "Good. That means it matters." The world didn't stay kind. A rumor surfaced. Nothing explicit. Just enough to sharpen glances and shift conversations. Evelyn noticed how some board members suddenly spoke around Mara instead of to her. Mara noticed too. "I don't want to be your weakness," she said one evening, voice tight. Evelyn turned to her fully. "You're not. You're the reason I'm stronger." But fear crept in anyway. Mara had lived her whole life preparing for disappointment. Evelyn had lived hers pretending she didn't need anyone. That night, they argued, not loudly, not cruelly, but with the exhaustion of two women who cared too much. Mara slept on the couch. At 3 a.m., Evelyn sat on the floor beside her, back against the sofa. "I don't know how to love without controlling the outcome," Evelyn whispered. Mara reached down, fingers threading through hers. "Then don't control it. Just stay." Evelyn did. Evelyn never tried to replace anyone. She let Mara lead. She watched. She learned. She attended school plays quietly, sitting 2 rows back. She carried snacks in her bag, just in case. She learned how to listen when Mara's daughter talked about things that didn't matter to adults but mattered deeply to children. One evening, after a particularly long day, Mara's daughter looked up at Evelyn and said, "You make Mum happier." Evelyn's chest tightened. Later, when Mara apologized, unnecessarily, Evelyn shook her head. "I'm not afraid of this," she said. "I'm afraid of losing it." Mara kissed her then. Soft. Grateful. Evelyn lost something. Not her position, but a certain kind of protection. Some doors closed quietly. Some alliances cooled. She gained something else. At the kitchen table, late at night, Mara held her hands and said, "I know what it costs to choose a life." Evelyn smiled tiredly. "I'm just learning that success without love is a very clean kind of loneliness." They made decisions together. Real ones. Financial. Emotional. Practical. Love stopped being a feeling. It became an action. On their 1-year anniversary, not marked on any calendar, Evelyn played the voicemail again. They lay in bed, Mara half asleep against her shoulder. "Do you regret it?" Evelyn asked quietly. Mara smiled into her skin. "I regret the hangover. Not the honesty." Evelyn pressed a kiss to her hair. "That voicemail," she said, "was the moment someone loved me without trying to impress me." Mara lifted her head, eyes soft. "You were never unlovable. You were just unreachable." Evelyn swallowed. "Not anymore." They didn't become perfect. They became real. There were arguments about schedules, about space, about fear sneaking in when things felt too good. But there was also laughter in grocery aisles, hands brushing in public without apology, and quiet nights where no one felt alone. Sometimes, when Mara couldn't sleep, Evelyn would whisper, "Stay." And Mara always did. Because love, she learned, doesn't arrive polished. Sometimes it arrives as a drunken voicemail, trembling, imperfect, brave, and changes everything. I didn't understand what love was when I was little. I understood routines. Mornings. Who packed my lunch? Who remembered library day? Who sat on the edge of my bed when I pretended to be asleep but wasn't? I knew my mum before Evelyn. And I knew her after. The difference wasn't loud. It was in how she breathed. Before, Mum carried everything like it might fall if she loosened her grip. She smiled, but it was the kind that left early. She loved me fiercely, but there was always a part of her that felt braced. Then Evelyn arrived, not all at once, not with announcements. She arrived quietly. She took her shoes off at the door. She asked before sitting in my space. She watched more than she spoke. Adults think children don't notice these things. We do. I noticed how Mum stopped flinching when the phone rang late. How she laughed with her whole body again. How silence stopped feeling dangerous. Evelyn never tried to be my mother. That's why she became family. Years later, when I was old enough to understand what CEOs were, I asked Mum once. "Were you scared when you fell in love with her?" Mum smiled in that way she does when she's remembering something important. "I didn't fall," she said. "I told the truth, and she stayed." I learned something then. Love isn't the grand gesture people talk about. It isn't perfection. It isn't even courage, exactly. It's staying. Staying when it's inconvenient. Staying when it costs you something. Staying when fear gives you every excuse to leave. Sometimes I hear them late at night, talking softly in the kitchen. No urgency. No performance. Just 2 women choosing each other again, in ordinary voices. And I think about how it all started, with a voicemail that was never meant to be heard. Funny, isn't it? The bravest things often sound like accidents. She thought the voicemail was a mistake. Years later, she understood. It was the moment she stopped being afraid.